Hi guys, I just want to take you through how to complete some of the formulas for the Pixie Plates pre-release, which is for this summer's exam. To follow along with this tutorial, you are going to need the practice spreadsheet and the data file. You'll also need the pre-release case study. So the first thing you want to do is have a read of the pre-release scenario, highlight anything that is important. You also want to do this in the exam, so even though you've read through it before, make sure when you get in the exam you read the case study again, highlight any key bits of information and work from there. So for the purposes of this tutorial, I've highlighted two bits of information. The first being that each carat is 0.2 of a gram, and the second is that a stone is produced by compressing powder that is half a carat. Now, in the spreadsheet, there were 3 pages already created for you. There's the designs page, the stones page, and the stock control page. The designs page is where you design each of your plates, and there's formulas to calculate the total number of stones used in that. The stones page is where you enter the amount of powder that you started off with. And the stock control page is where you calculate how much stock you have remaining. So the first thing I want to do is to import the text bin, which is this, into my spreadsheet. So when importing data from a text file, you need to import it into a new page. So I want to create a new worksheet by clicking on this logo down the bottom here. Then click on the data tab, and we are importing from a text file, which is that option. You then want to find where you've saved your text file, if I can remember where I've put it. You then simply select your file and click Alt. It's asking what type of data we have, and the data we are using is delimited. Then it's asking how it's delimited, and it is delimited by commas, so we want to tick this tick box up here. Then simply click Next. We don't need to worry about the formatting. And now the last option where it's importing the data, and A1 of this sheet should be sufficient. So if you click OK, it will then paste the data into 2 separate columns. The next thing we want to do is transfer, actually it's not transfer, we want to name our sheet. And it's always a good idea to name the imported data the same name as the text file that it's come from, just so that you don't forget. So if you right click on your worksheet down the bottom, click on rename, and then type in the new name. And I'll just call mine Gem Powder Imported. So now I want to transfer this data into my stones page. And to do this, I simply click on F7 where I want my data to start, press on equals, and then come to the imported gem powder sheet. Click on the first value I want transferred and press enter whilst I'm still in the imported sheet. It will then copy the values over. I can now just drag down and then drag across. And because there's only 2 columns, I'm only dragging across just to the next one along. Now the formula for the carats. Because we know the weight, we can calculate the carats. And the values we've been given are in our pre-release. So we've been told that each carat is 0.2 of a gram. So if we know the grams, which is the values contained in here, we can calculate the number of carats that we've got. So the formula for the carats is just going to be the weight multiplied by 0.2. And that will give us the number of carats that we have. And this formula I can simply just drag down, and I just want to double check that this H14 is working with the right values. So if I double click on it, it will highlight it with a blue box so I know that yes, this is indeed working with the correct values. And that's it for the stones page. So now moving on to the designs page. The first thing you'll notice is that there are 3 empty spaces up the top. But as soon as you start typing in letters that correspond to the stones, it changes the colour of those. So I think to make the user of the spreadsheet's life a little easier, it may be useful to add some drop downs so they can choose the values rather than type them in. To create a drop down box, you want to click on the data tab and then data validation, but you'll notice it's grayed out. This is probably because the sheet is protected, so we just need to unprotect this. And the password we have been told is edXL. So now that my sheet is unprotected, I can click on the data validation tab. I'm creating a drop down, which is also known as a list, and then the sources of my list. This, I can either type in the values or I can just highlight this area here because this contains all the values that I need. And now if I press enter and OK, that will create a drop down for me. Now all I need to do is drag down and across, and now each of my cells in this area have a drop down. I can now just simply copy and paste this in here and in here, and now these two have corresponding drop downs. So the first formula we need to enter on the designs page is going to be in D18. Now this is to count how many times C appears up here. So for every time we've got C, this needs to represent accordingly. And for this we need a count if formula. So as with all formulas, it begins with an equals, and then if you double click on count if, the banner down the bottom breaks down what you need to do. So the first thing it's saying is I need to select my range, and that's the area where the values are going to be coming from. In this case, the range is from C7 across to L16. If I press comma, it will move on to the next part of the formula, and this is the criteria. And the criteria that I'm looking for is the letter C. I want to count every time the letter C appears. So I can just type in C and then press enter. And you can see that this has now counted the values up here and changed that. So if I add one more C just to check, yeah, that's increased. But if I'm to drag this down or have the same formulas going across, I'm going to have to change this. I'm going to have to change this to an E when it's over here, then to an L, then to an O, which is a little bit time consuming. So to save myself a bit of time, instead of typing C, it will probably be better to just reference B18 as C appears in there. And then when I drag this down, this formula here is now referencing B24, which contains the value T. So now if I choose T, that should count to 1. But you may have noticed when I double clicked on my T formula down the bottom, the range has moved from C7 down to C13. So we need to go and adjust the formula to make sure that the range stays in place throughout. So we need to select our range and add absolute cell referencing. And you can either do this by adding $signs to the beginning of the C and each of the letters, or the hotkey is F4. So if you press F4, that will lock in all the values with that range. And now when I select it and drag it all the way down, my range is still selected. I want to type in the same formula for these three as well. Now the cost per carat, this is simply going to be the same values as this, the costs per carat in here. So I just want to transfer the values from my stones page into my designs page. So again, it's just equals, and then I'll select the cost per carat for citrine, which is 239, and then that transfers that in, and I'll just drag it down, and just want to double check that my value for T is the same, 0.7, which it is. Now my total costs is simply the total cost of the stones used in a particular design. So if I've got 4 citrine stones, I want to know how much it's going to cost for the 4 citrine stones in this plate over here. Now if you remember back in the pre-release, we were told that 1 stone equals half a carat. Therefore, if we are counting stones up here, if we've got 4 stones, they equal half a carat. So that would essentially be 2 carats. And then we've got the cost per carat in cell F18. So the formula for the cost of my stones is going to be the number of stones divided by 2, because it's half a carat, and I'll put that in brackets so that calculation is performed first, and then multiply this by the cost per carat, and this will give me £4.78. And now with this formula, I can just drag that down and the cost for all of my stones. And when I start selecting different stones, the counts are increasing and the totals are being adjusted. Now go ahead and copy these same formulas into these two areas here. And remembering the count of the citrine here is for this range, and the count for citrine here is for that range. And then all the formulas are the same as these, but with the areas that you're copying from adjusted slightly. Now that you've entered in all the formulas, you should have results that look something like this. So double check the formulas that you've got in these 2 boxes against the screen here. The next thing we want to do is to calculate the total. Now this is simply the total stones used, and that formula is just D18 plus P18 plus AB18, and that will total up the total number of citrine stones used for all 3 plates. And now this formula can just simply be dragged down, and that will give us a total for all the stones across all 3 plates. Now with the remaining grams, we will come back to this in just a moment. First of all, we'd like to move on to the stock control page. So the first formula in the stock control page is in D7, and this is for the total cost of design number 1. So design number 1 is on our designs page, and you'll notice that as you add stones, there's a price increasing down the bottom in cell I25. This is the total cost of all the stones together. So the formula in D7 of our stock control page, which calculates the total cost of the first design, is equals, and then flick over to the design page, and it is I25. And then in here, just press enter, and that will give me that price. And now I just need the price for design number 2 and design number 3. The numbers sold, so far I don't think it's calculated. I think that's just going to be a static value that the user decides. You may be asked to enter a formula in there during the exam, but for now I believe it's a static value. But what we want to do is calculate the total number of citrine stones used to produce however many plates are sold. So if we sell 5 plates of design number 1, we want 4 multiplied by the number that we've said we're selling to give us the total number of stones used. So we are going to need to use the number sold in here and then multiply that by the number of citrine stones in our design. And this way, when values up here change, it's produced, or it calculates the number of stones accordingly. So this formula I'm going to need to drag down, but because D18 is static, when I drag it down it's always going to remain the same. I need to add some absolute cell referencing to this. So just highlight it, hit F4, and now when I drag it down, it's multiplying D8 still by D24 of the designs page. And D24 is this cell here, so that is correct. Just need to do the same thing for this cell over here. So this is going to equal our number up here multiplied by the citrine stones in design number 2. Probably helps to add your multiply symbol. That's better. Drag that down, and then the same thing for number 3. Now, don't worry about these zeros. It's the formulas that you're asked for, and if you enter values up here anyway, it changes automatically. So in design number 3, if I enter in 10, presumably I've only got 1 citrine stone, yeah. So my formulas are working correctly, even though it just displays 0. And now the total used is just these 3 values added up together, and because they're next to each other we can use a sum function, or if you want you can just highlight each of them individually and then added plus the next one plus the next one plus the next one. But to use a sum, it's just equals sum, highlight your range, and then press enter. And now just double check that this is totaling up the right row, which it is. The number of carats, so far here we've got the number of stones used. So the number of carats is again going to be a calculation based on the data found in our pre-release. So we've been told here that 1 stone is half a carat. So if we've got our total stones, and we want to know the number of carats, it's just simply the number of stones divided by 2. And that will give us the number of carats. And I can drag this formula down. And now the weight is again another calculation which uses data found in the pre-release. We now know how many carats we've got, and we have been told that each carat is 0.2 of a gram. So to calculate the weight, we just want to multiply our number of carats by 0.2. Now this 2 I can just drag down, and I'll check when I get to T that yes, this is multiplying that value by 0.2. The last value that we have is the stock remaining. Now to calculate the stock remaining, we need to know the amount of stock that we've used and the amount of stock that we started off with. The amount of stock that we started off with is detailed in the stones page over here, and that was the original data that we imported. And the amount of weight that we've used is this value here. So to calculate how much stock we have remaining, we simply want to take away the weight that we've got to begin with, which is in here. Sorry, this value, take away the amount that we've used. And that will give us the amount that we've got remaining. And again, this I can drag down and see that this is taking F14 of the stones page away from I15, which is this cell here. And now if I choose some designs and add some stones, adjust the amount sold. So if we sell an even number, so if we sell 10, you can see that it's now totaled up the total number of emerald powder used, the number of total emerald stones across all 3 plates, the number of carats, the weight, and the stock remaining. And then the last thing we need to do is back in our designs, we've still got this empty cell here, which is our remaining grams. Now this is likely to be the value from our stock control, so that as you're creating your designs you can see how much powder you've got left. So the formula for the remaining grams is simply going to be the same value as the stock remaining on this. And in this I can just drag down. And now if I start designing some plates, as long as I've got some orders, the value of my stock remaining will adjust. So now if I play about with these stones used here, you can see that the stock remaining is adjusting. And even when I run out of stones, it's going to highlight and tell me that I've gone over. So this is pretty much it for the formulas we can work out based on the pre-release, but in the exam you will be given some extra. There'll be extra sheets and extra formulas, so make sure you read the exam paper from beginning to end and answer the questions that you're asked. Don't just go into the exam and just replicate this solution, because this may not be what you're being asked to do. So please make sure you read the exam paper.